Hi everyone, my name is Robert Palmquist, and we're going to spend a little bit of time here talking about speech generating devices. Spend a bit of time on the history of some of these systems, where they came from, talk about what's available today and what's coming soon. We're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about features that you should be looking for if you're interested in procuring a speech generating system today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to start talking a little bit about first my background and how I got involved in speech generating devices. So again, my name is Robert Palmquist. I'm currently CEO of 3 companies. SpeechGear does instant language translation. So as you say something in English, it would simultaneously speak it in Arabic or Russian or Spanish or something like that. Auditory Sciences is a company focused on communication products for people with disabilities, and we're just starting up a new company called Church Captioning. But before all that, before I started these various companies, what I was involved in is basically if you watch any of the James Bond movies, where there's this individual named Q that develops all the gadgets for the British intelligence services. Well, I was Q for the US military, and so developing all sorts of neat little gadgets, grasshoppers that would hop upstairs or devices that would slide under doors, to big systems like robotic arms in orbit that would maintain our satellite systems. And so very much high technology. I am an admitted geek. I find it very relaxing to sit down and read a technical paper in the evening. It's something I would very much enjoy doing. So again, a very different background than perhaps most people. But how did I get involved then in the speech generating systems? And the answer is my wife is a speech pathologist working in the high schools, middle schools and high schools. And she was continually bringing home some of these speech generating devices with her to program in the evenings. And I was just, I'll use the word appalled at what these devices were doing. I mean, that's a very strong word, but it was a very strong feeling. These systems were, and some of them today are, extremely expensive. People were paying in the order of $7,000, $8,000. This particular device here today is still available for $8,000 to buy a communication device. And typically, individuals do not have a lot of discretionary money to spend, and so I was just amazed at the expense of these things. Also, the technology that was put into these was extremely outdated. Very robotic voices, very outdated interfaces, which made them very difficult to use. And it quite shocked me in terms of the state of the art of what was happening in the speech generating devices. And bottom line is, very easily, we could do much better. And the community as a whole has done much better. So over the last decade, you've seen some very significant changes in speech generating systems. And we're going to talk about those quite a bit as we move forward. Here's what we're going to be covering. So we're going to go over the 4 basic types of speech generating devices that are out there. There's a purpose for each of these, and we're going to go the pluses and minuses of these various types of systems that are out there. Again, we're going to talk a bit about the history, going over that quick, but also what's current and what's coming. And again, we're going to spend quite a bit of time in step 3 here. Features to look for in today's system. So if you're in the market, if you're wondering what's out there, we're going to give you some advice in terms of systems to look for. A little bit of time of funding, where to get it. I always get asked that question. And then to give you some areas, some links where you can keep up with news in terms of speech generating devices. So let's start out here talking about the 4 basic types of speech generating systems. And we're going to start really simple here. So again, as I mentioned, my involvement with the military side, and in the military, still used today, are very simple communication boards. So basically, pieces of paper with a glossy laminate over to keep them from getting wet. You know, this is a $5 communication system, and it still serves a very nice purpose. Very obviously low verbal here. You're not going to be able to hold a conversation like we're having today. But when you're in a pinch, certainly something like this can certainly help you out. In addition to that, you have these static electronic boards, where what you're doing is having a very limited fixed set of phrases that are going to support typically an individual with very limited cognitive skills. And so again, very beneficial in terms of being able to communicate very simple phrases. I am hungry, I need bathroom, things like that. So certainly there are reasons for these types of static systems to exist. Low price, language independent, easy to use, but also very limited in terms of communication ability, very limited vocabulary, and basically inflexible. They can only communicate what has been input into the systems. So you have to adapt your communications to whatever that type of system supports. Let's get over to the next one. So symbol-based dynamic. So there's this history, and we'll get into that a little bit more, where people started working on speech-generating devices for low cognitive abilities, where reading was not assumed. The ability to read was not assumed. So we went to symbol-based. And what unfortunately happened is the ability to use 3 or 4 symbols to put together a very simplistic phrase, I want water, ended up trying to become more verbose, and you ended up with these systems with hundreds and hundreds of symbols, which are very difficult to use. I'm a technology geek. I understand technology very well. It would be extremely difficult and extremely frustrating for me to generate speech as I'm doing right now using a symbol-based system. It'd be basically impossible. But yet that is the approach that a lot of systems used and are still using today. You can see systems like this that are available today with all these pictures and layouts and icons, and it's really a challenge to be able to use those to generate speech. And people decided to take all these symbols and squish them down into even smaller sized formats. So now on your iPhone, you can have all these tiny little icons, and you're supposed to be able to somehow press them in order to generate phrases. Very difficult to use. Upside, compared to a static system, they are more verbose. You do end up with low-cost software applications. Certainly, we're well beyond the side of $8,000. Now we're talking $8 for these types of software applications. But the symbol interface is very difficult to use. If you have the ability to read, you do not want to use a symbol-based system. Very simple. Very simplistic. You don't want to do that. So let's get over to some of the other ones. Third type that I want to cover is people are starting to develop handwriting interfaces. Why is that so important? The answer is, with a verbose system, you need to somehow be able to enter character sets. If you're using a typewriter-only system, such as a laptop, that's a very portable system. I can take that laptop, I can move it from one desk to another desk, and be able to type with it and generate speech. But I can't use it while I'm on the go, when I'm on my feet. For example, out on a golf course, or maybe walking down in the hallway in an office complex, or in a shopping mall. It's very difficult to be able to find a counter in order to place a device in order to start using it. So you want a device that can be used with a single hand. Again, symbol-based, you could do that, be tapping, but very difficult to have conversations. But writing-based systems, you can write with one hand as long as you have the fine motor skills to do so, and it becomes very verbose. Tapping on the screen, combining that with writing, becomes a very nice interface to be looking for. So again, extremely verbose. You can say absolutely anything that you want. You do not have to write out entire sentences, which would take time. The other person might get frustrated by that. You can create shortcuts and be able to use those. We'll get into those features in step 3 here that you want to be looking for. The stylus also means that you can draw. So this is a communication tool. So in addition to speaking phrases out loud, you could pull up a picture, for example, or a calendar and be able to circle on that, or just a whiteboard, and you could sketch out something that you're looking for. So again, a stylus also gives you additional abilities beyond simply being able to generate speech. The downside, handwriting does require fine motor skills, the ability to write. And so again, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. The fourth system, which is always out there, is hybrid systems that do indeed combine all these approaches. So very versatile. The system adapts to how you want to communicate versus the other way around. But again, more options, not necessarily better for all users. This is designed more so for people that, again, cognitively are at level to their peers. And so if you fit that category, certainly you want to be looking for some of these hybrid systems. So let's talk a bit more details here. And we'll go a bit into history. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but I kind of find it interesting to know what was happening in the past in terms of how we got here today. So let's talk really quick about understanding speech. I hope you can hear these. I'm going to turn up the volume a little bit on my speaker here. But in the very past, what we had was very robotic sounding voices, something like this. Oops, let's see if I can get that again.
Danger, Will Robinson, danger.
And so that's back from the old TV series Lost in Space. I'm really dating myself here. But if you remember that, the robot was always talking about danger, Will Robinson. And let's jump forward at least to the 1980s here with C-3PO and Star Wars.
Hello, sir. I am C-3PO Human Cyborg Relations.
Obviously a robotic-sized voice. Now, actually, it's a human actor, but they made efforts to turn that into a robotic-type voice. Anybody can clearly understand what's being said there, but it's also not a human that is indeed speaking that. Jumping a little bit forward, there are two main approaches for speech synthesis that are used today. Format synthesis is generated based on mathematical models. And so what you do is you generate a mathematical model, if you will, of the vocal tract. And from that, I'm able to easily generate different types of voices, a deeper voice, a higher pitched voice. These sorts of things are all part of the format generated. And here's an example of that. Yeah, I hope you could understand that. Then in addition to that, what we have is the newer approach of concatenative, where what you're doing is taking actual segments of speech, phonetic representations, and you're concatenating them together in order to generate speech that is still, you can identify it as being synthesized, but it is very much more natural sounding.
Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
So an example, going back to HAL 2000 on Space Odyssey 2001. So again, various different types of speech synthesis that have been used in the past, but today mostly what we're using in concatenative approaches where we are automatically pasting together segments of pre-recorded speech in order to generate the vocal output. Goals, number one, easy to understand. When you're looking at a system, that's first and foremost, is that you want people to be able to easily understand what you're saying. Goal number two is to have it indeed sound like a human. If you can achieve both of those, then we've got it made. What's really old, going back in time, back in 1960, what you saw is systems like this, where you would scan through a set of symbols, again, back to this history of symbols, and once you reached the appropriate symbol, you would select it and it would get voiced out loud. Very difficult because you're waiting for that scanner to happen, and so, you know, certainly useful at its time, and there are still, of course, individuals that need to use a system like that today, but there's certainly more variability in terms of what's available. Back in 1970s, 1980s, what you saw is single-purpose devices. A lot of this comes out of the way the systems were funded through the government, but nonetheless you had single-purpose bricks, I'll use that term, that could only do one purpose, that was speech generation. Again, expensive, bulky, these were the things that my wife was bringing home that I certainly wanted to get away from. So today what's happening is we're seeing the end of single-purpose devices. The Medicare, Medicaid funded systems that are costing $7,000, $8,000 are going away. Dynavox, the market leader in these about a decade ago, is no more. Their stock dropped to nothing and they ended up basically filing bankruptcy and getting acquired. You're starting to see a lot of the old established big players that are used to sell these $7,000, $8,000 systems feel very much the pressure from the startups that are developing low-cost software. So you're starting to see some lawsuits and such. PRC, being a very established firm, in this case sued one of the startups. And so you're seeing some of these actions that are happening, but definitely the big firms that were developing these very expensive systems are basically going away. Another thing going away is these complicated symbol-based layouts. And so again, very much a role for an individual with low cognitive abilities to have a symbol-based display. I don't want to say symbol-based displays are going away. What's going away is these extremely complicated layouts. So something like this, very difficult to generate speech. And lots of different things where they tried to come up with the core words that you would use during the course of a given day. But again, all very difficult. And to make matters even worse, you took systems with all these symbols and you tried to shrink them down to a very small platform. So you will see these symbol-based software running on iPads or iPhones even. You know, talk about a small display. And the idea is you're supposed to somehow be able to generate phrases out of these tiny little pictures that are on your iPhone. Very difficult to use. That type of technology is going away. What is available is lots of very innovative software applications that make it much easier for you to generate speech. These software apps are very inexpensive compared to the $8,000 of the past. They happily run on a multitude of low-cost devices. So instead of having to pay $7,000, $8,000 for that single-purpose brick, now you can buy a Chromebook for roughly $29. Various iPads and PC tablets that are out there. So again, no longer a single-purpose device that only does one function. Now you can use this device to surf the internet, to Facebook, Skype, whatever it might be. Whatever you want to do. This is a full smartphone or a full computer. Typically the software, as you probably found out, if you're buying it free or for a very low price, it's a teaser to get you hooked. And once you start using the system, then you start buying various add-ons and the monthly subscriptions. And this isn't a bad thing. I don't want to make the software developers look greedy or something like here. They have bills to pay. They have developers' salaries, these sorts of things. And so paying something for this speech generating is a good thing because that's going to help that team continue to develop the capabilities. So free isn't necessarily good for you. If you're getting something for free, you're going to get basically no support and no continuity of product development. But again, just be cognizant that a lot of these firms, what they're doing is when you place that initial order, you are going to continually be providing some sort of funding to them in order to continue the development effort and for you to continue access to the system. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but just be cognizant about it. What's coming? In the near term, 1 to 2 years, voice banking is being made much easier. So voice banking is a term that maybe you haven't heard of before. The concept of voice banking is that if you know or if there's a risk that you will be losing your ability to speak. So for example, you're having some sort of throat surgery or various situations where you could have advance notice that there's a chance that you personally will lose the ability to speak. If that's the situation, look into voice banking. This is the ability to create a synthesized voice engine using your voice. So at the end of the day, it's going to be your voice that is speaking, that is being synthesized. That's the term of voice banking. Now, historically, that's taking hours and hours and hours of reading prepared documents in order to generate enough of these pre-recorded phonemes that we're going to use to concatenate to generate speech. So you would read a phrase, the quick brown fox jumped over, or whatever it might be. And from that, we are taking the phonetic representation of what you just said. Phonemes are the smallest portions of words. So a word like cat has 3 phonemes in it, ka-at. And there's 42 phonemes that make up the American English language. And so we're going to take all those different representations of phonemes that you produce, and we're going to be able to concatenate them together to generate a synthesized speech of whatever it is you want to say. That's the aspect of voice banking. And again, historically, it's taken hours and hours and hours and hours of reading these prepared texts in order to generate an appropriate synthesized voice. That's very much shrinking down. And so instead of taking 40, 50, 60, maybe 100 hours worth of reading, now they're shrinking that down to, let's say, 10 to 15 hours. It's still a significant investment in time, but certainly very much reduced, and the results are very much better. Another item that's certainly coming is improved dynamic and temporal predictive linguist features. So again, I'm using some multi-syllable words here. But predictive linguistic features, meaning as I am typing in a sentence, the ability to predict what the next word is or to correct for a previous word that was mistyped. And so you're seeing this all the time. This isn't locked into speech generation by any stretch of the word. Texting and such like this, you're seeing significant improvements in predictive features. Now, dynamic means that I'm able to contextually search the input stream and go back and correct words that were previously entered. So I'm not doing this on a word-for-word basis. I'm doing it as the sentence is constructed. Temporal means I'm using a timestamp as part of this predictive element. So in the morning at 7 a.m., I'm definitely going to be using a different set of word groupings than I would, say, at 7 o'clock at night. And so by using a temporal and geographic-based modeling, I can better estimate or better predict the various sentences that are going to be input. The results are actually quite magical. It's very encouraging, some of the features that are coming up when you combine dynamic with temporal with geographic data in order to come up with better predictive models. Better handwriting recognition is certainly happened over the last decade, and it's continuing to improve. And so in the past, you kind of needed to have big letters, and you could only write in cursive. And again, with the very much improved statistical processing capabilities, we're able to do a much better job of handwriting recognition, and very much better integration into social media. So for example, one of our products, Interact Voice through Auditory Sciences, is very much integrated directly into Skype and other sorts of communication software. So if you're Skyping with an individual, you can use our software to generate speech. And again, very tight coupling with Microsoft in terms of being able to do that with their Skype product. And so you're going to see more and more of that because social media has become such a part of our lives. Having a system that directly integrates with that is important, and it's also very much coming. I did want to throw in something here long term. Again, I'm a technology geek. I tend to work on things that are most people would think impossible. But certainly we're doing things that are going to be very much changing the entire world of speech generating devices. So roughly about 15 years ago, we were working with a very serious effort with the military on using thoughts to control objects. And so as a result of that, for example, there are wheelchairs today that a quadriplegic can use with thought control in order to steer that wheelchair forward, backwards, left, right, things like that. There's lots of neural activities being researched in order to control devices. And an individual, Ted Berger, working specifically with dynamic neural network interfaces. I guess I'll skip over a lot of the technology here. Bottom line, it is coming. So the ability to use your thought waves in order to control devices is certainly coming and getting to the point where eventually, and I'm talking 5-10 years sort of time frame, you will start seeing the beginnings of being able to synthesize speech using thoughts. Pretty far out there, isn't it? But certainly the concept of self-driving cars, if I mentioned to you that 10 years ago, something that we were working on back then, you would have said, wait a minute, there's no way cars can drive themselves up and down interstates. And you're starting to see that. And so 10 years, a lot happens in that sort of time frame when you're looking at technology. So again, I just wanted to throw that out there in terms of some far out sort of capabilities. Okay, let's slow down a little bit here and let's talk about features to look for in today's systems. And so again, I'm going to step through this a little bit slower. We're going to go into more detail. But number one, look for systems that adapt to how you want to communicate versus the other way around. Historically, what you've been getting is systems that have a fairly fixed vocabulary, a fixed way to use that vocabulary, very limited abilities in order to modify that system. What that system forced you to do then is to modify your communications to whatever that system supported. That's going away, that's gone away. With new systems, you want a system that will adapt to how you want to communicate. The system needs to adapt to you. Each of us has our own personalized way of communicating, our own mannerisms, our own idioms, colloquialisms, acronyms that we might use, inflections, all the above. And you want a system to reflect your personality instead of changing your personality to whatever the system can support. That's important, and it's also very much available today. The ability to say absolutely anything that you want to say. The ability to add your own vocabulary. The ability to create your own shortcuts. You want those shortcuts to be created by you because that way they're meaningful to you. They're directly applicable to your situation and how you want to communicate. The ability to add a personalized voice. If you want a British accent, you should have a British accent, or Australian, or an Indian, whatever it might be. If you want to talk a little bit slower, talk a little bit faster, in a deeper voice, or a higher pitched voice, all these capabilities are available in systems today, and you should look for a system that supports that. We talked a little bit earlier about systems that support one-handed usage, and this becomes quite important if you're an active person. If you're out on the golf course, if you're going out shopping, if you're on your feet at work, walking down a hallway or in a warehouse, anything like this, you want the ability to be able to communicate holding that device in one hand and tapping or writing with the other one. A two-handed system isn't going to suffice for you in those situations where you're on the go, where you're on your feet, where you're moving. Also, no need to connect to the internet. You might be surprised by that because internet and connectivity is everywhere. Well, it's not. So what you find often, especially if you're traveling overseas or if you're inside a parking garage or something like this, you're in situations where you may not be able to connect to the internet, especially if you're working for the military in classified type environments where the internet is strictly, no internet is strictly enforced. But bottom line, most of the systems out there today do have a mode, at least, in which they can run without any connectivity to the cloud. And it's something to think about as you're looking for a system. Let's get a little more specific here. So look for systems that have the following. First of all, software that you own can back up and reinstall. And so when I say software that you own, that means that you have a physical copy that you can have on your premises. If you are just subscribing to a cloud-based model, that's great as long as A, you have internet connectivity, which again you may not always have, and B, as long as cloud company is still in business. A lot of the startups that are working on speech generating systems are significantly underfunded. They're trying to put systems out for free at low cost, and there's a bit of a cost proposition there, and so there is no guarantee that that cloud-based only company is still going to be around next month. You don't want to be in a position where you're creating this personalized system, customizing it for all use, for your particular use, and all of a sudden it's gone. So have software that you can own, that you can back up, and you can reinstall. What do I mean by that? Devices, speech generating devices, are going to break. They're going to fall out of your pocket, they're going to hit the concrete, you may step on it, whatever it might be, those systems do break, and you want the ability to be able to reinstall all that information that you've created and become familiar with using on another device should that accident happen, and it will happen. I mean, it's just reality of life that things break. So the ability to back up your data, reinstall on another device, and the ability to have a local copy versus cloud-based only. Cloud-based is fine, but let's make sure that when you're buying a system that you're not totally reliant on the internet in order to use it. Another aspect, so we've talked a bit about this one-handed interface. So we want the ability for handwriting, typing, and swiping interface. Swiping may be a term that's unfamiliar, but what that means is instead of having to tap on a keyboard in order to get individual letters, what I do is I swipe my finger along that keyboard. So if I wanted to enter the word the, instead of tapping T-H-E, I could swipe going from the letter T to the letter H to the letter E and then lift my finger off. So one little motion, T-H-E, and from that I'm generating the word. By doing that, we end up with a much better predictive model. We know when there's breaks between the individual letters. So swiping is a very quick interface. I think it's faster than typing, and certainly it allows better prediction in terms of the words. So if you haven't used swiping, take a look at it, because it is going to improve the accuracy and the contextual maps of your input. Important point here. if you're going to use handwriting as an interface, use a tablet with a digitizer. Again, I'm throwing another technical term out here that may not be familiar. A digitizer is very simple to tell when you have a digitizer, and that means that you have a special stylus that's going to be used to write on that screen. So a lot of people think, well, I don't want to have a special stylus because I may lose it. Well, there's a huge benefit for that special stylus, and that is you get much, 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 exclamation point, underlined red text, much better resolution with that digitizer. And so if you're doing handwriting, now I can do the handwriting in what I call a normal size font. If you're using something like an iPad with handwriting recognition, what you end up writing is very big letters. They do not have a digitizer in iPads. They have a capacitance-based touchscreen. And so you're writing these big block letters in order to generate text. You don't want to do that. It's very difficult and cumbersome to write out entire sentences in big block letters. And so something like a Microsoft Surface Pro has a stylus, battery-powered stylus, and with that you're able to get much better accuracy. The term battery-powered also scares people. The batteries in a stylus will easily last you 3 months, 6 months, maybe a full year. So this is not something that you need to worry about changing out every day. Buying a spare stylus, maybe 20 bucks, something along those lines. Buy a spare one, have it around in case the one gets lost. But if you're going to go handwriting, you absolutely want to get a tablet with a digitizer. The very simple way for you to identify that is that you have a special stylus. You will not be able to write on the screen with your finger. Instead, you're using that stylus to write. The huge, huge, huge advantage is the recognition and the ability to recognize what you're writing. Term expansions, another feature that you want. The ability to create your own shortcuts. Boy, let me just demonstrate one of these real quick here. So I'll pull up, in this case, Interact, the Interact voice system, and let's just go in here. And so a term expansion is a shortcut that you create in order to simplify the process of entering sentences. So in my particular case, I have one HML. So that's a shortcut for HML. Can you help me find, in this case, I don't know, my glasses, something that I often say. And so when I hit the translate button, HMF is going to be automatically expanded into can you help me find, for example.
Can you help me find my glasses?
And so you can see.
Can you help me find my glasses?
So you can see that came out as can you help me find my glasses, the entire phrase. Another one I have here is, let's see, IWL. I would like some help, something along those lines. And so when I do that and enter the Enter key, IWL again gets automatically expanded.
I would like some help.
You can have shortcuts for individual words, or you could have shortcuts mean something much more. So for example, if I enter a phrase, this is a shortcut I believe I have called intro. And intro, what that does is it voices out an entire paragraph that I can play for people if I'm using this system. So I'll show you what that looks like.
Hello, I'm using this system to help me communicate with others. Let me show you how it works.
So instead of having to type out that entire sentence or write it out or whatever it might be, I can just have that shortcut. The shortcut should also be contextually based. So in that case, I used intro, whereas if I type this is the intro to my presentation. So in this case, I don't want intro expanded, and because it's used in contextual based, it's not going to be. For example,
this is the intro to my presentation.
So again, what we've been talking about here, I'll shrink this down. So what we've been talking about here is term expansions. Another phrase I'll use for that is shortcuts. You want the ability to create your own shortcuts because those are the ones that are going to be personalized to the way you want to communicate. So make sure you get a system that is easy to create those shortcuts and that you can use the shortcuts anywhere in any sentence structure, and you can use multiple shortcuts within a given sentence. So a very powerful feature to enable you to easily say what you want to say in a rapid fashion is term expansions. So make sure that that's part of the system that you get. Also part of this is favorites lists. And so important is easy to create and edit the list. So let's take a look. I'll go back to Interact here. And down at the bottom here, what I have is a favorites list. So many systems have favorites lists. This is not a concept unique to Interact, but certainly it is a concept that you want in your system. And so in this particular case, I have a favorites list for shopping for shoes. I could have one for going into a restaurant or ordering food at Burger King, another one for McDonald's. Whatever it might be, you can have as many favorites lists as you want. And these are simply phrases that you pre-populate that you'll use in a given situation. So for example, this one is called shopping for shoes. And so I could type something like, or I could tap on something like this.
I need a size 8 shoe.
And that's going to get voiced out loud. So if I'm going to be in a situation where I'm going to be shopping for shoes, I would pull up that particular favorite list. I'd also have a favorite list for greeting, something that says, "Hi, my name is Robert." You know, friendly phrases that I want to use as part of the greetings. Again, I can have as many favorites lists as I want. Notice that when I got back here also to my PowerPoint, easy to create and edit the list. Now this is where a lot of systems are going to fall short. So what you're going to have is favorites lists, but it's very difficult, very awkward to create the favorites list, to rearrange the sequence of those phrases, to edit them, and all the above. So in Interact, and like many other systems, what we've done is you can use any word editor to create those favorites lists. I'm sorry, any editor. So it could be Notepad, it could be Microsoft Word, it could be Google Docs, and we have a little tool that whatever that document is, you convert it to a favorites list, and now you can use that as part of your speech generation system. So again, software that you own can back up, handwriting, typing, and swiping interface, term expansions, and favorites lists. And let's jump to the next one, the next slide. We're going to continue here. And the next item that I want to talk about is sentence placeholders. And so multiple placeholders anywhere in a sentence. So again, maybe some new terms here that we're going into. So here, for example, is a placeholder. Let me pull this up on the screen. So what you see is I would like this in size, and then you have the square brackets, a modifier to the sentence. So what this is giving you is within the favorite list, instead of having a static phrase that's difficult to edit, now you have the ability to easily modify that phrase. So instead of having to write out or type out or all the above, I would like this in size 6, please. Now you can tap on the phrase and just enter the number 6, and that's going to get voiced out loud.
I would like this in size 6, please.
Something like, do these come in, I could have a larger size. Or I could say red, or any modifier that I want.
Do these come in a larger size?
Or, as I said, do these come in the color red? If I could type, there we go.
Do these come in red?
So again, a very powerful tool in order to quickly say what you want to say. Instead of having to write out an entire sentence or type out an entire sentence or be locked into some sentence or search for symbols in order to modify this, all I need to do is tap on that phrase and enter the modifier. As I mentioned in the PowerPoint slide there, we want the ability to be able to use multiple placeholders throughout the phrase. So in this particular case, I'm going to pull this one up, and it says, I would like to buy blank tickets for the blank show. So just an example of being able to use multiple placeholders. So I want 2 tickets for the, what should I say, 7 p.m. show. Something like that.
I would like 2 tickets for the 7 p.m. show.
So again, very simple approach to be able to quickly modify a sentence to say exactly what you want to say anytime, anywhere. So you want multiple placeholders anywhere in a sentence. Customized voices. Again, I'm going to hit you with another term here that you may not be aware of, sappy voices. Sappy doesn't mean bad voices. Sappy is a type of format, I think historically came out of IBM. But sappy voices are the standard in which new voices can be added to your system. So when you buy your speech generating system, that system should also have the flexibility that at a later date you can add an additional voice. The voice technologies, voice synthesis technologies are continually improving. And so you can buy a system from one vendor and then buy a voice maybe from Nuance or Loquendo, Acapella, various firms out there that make high quality voices, and they are available. So you could add those to your systems, but you can only add them if that initial speech generating system is compatible with the SAPI format. So you want a speech generating system that is going to be able to dynamically look for new voices and be able to add them, and the key is, are they SAPI compliant? That's the acronym that you're looking for. I'm going to give you another term here, something that we created or invented the term, called sociable sounds. And these are the sounds that you use in normal conversations, very polite conversations, where somebody's talking to you, you respond back with the sociable sounds, words like yeah, yeah, sure. And these are important parts of speech generation that are often overlooked. Very important. If you all of a sudden lose the ability to speak, you lose that ability to provide that social feedback, and that very much changes the dynamic of your conversation with people, and therefore it changes your relationship with those people. And so the ability to have sociable sounds is important, and it's also certainly supported by systems. And so, for example, let me jump over here. And again, I'm using a female voice in these particular presentations, just so it's distinguished from my male voice. But certainly, if I were using the speech generation system in real life, I would be using a voice that's appropriate for me. But here, for example, we have a variety of sociable sounds.
Huh.
And so, again, just polite feedback that people are expecting as part of a conversation.
Okay. Sure. Thanks.
And so all you're doing is tapping on the screen in order to provide that sociable feedback. Again, very much overlooked by most speech generating systems, but very important in terms of the capabilities of the system that you're looking for. As part of the sociable sounds, you want them to be natural sounding. Voice synthesis engines have a very difficult time generating natural sounding sociable sounds. And so whatever system you get, you know, people will say, well, I could just enter a phonetic representation of that sociable sound into the voice engine, but it's going to come out sounding pretty poor. So spend a little bit of effort evaluating the system by seeing how well they support sociable sounds. Things like okay, yeah, sure, okay, but oh, those sorts of things are very difficult for a voice synthesis engine to support. A final element that we want is wireless external audio speakers. So the devices that you're getting, a Chromebook or a Microsoft Surface Pro, a lot of these have pretty low, well, they definitely have low-end audio speakers. So in a quiet environment, if you were at home, for example, that audio system is going to be fine. But put yourself in a shopping mall or in a cafeteria or a restaurant of any type of noise, or driving down the highway in a car with some noise. And the partner, the individual you're communicating with, is going to have a lot of difficulty hearing the audio coming out of those low-end speakers. So you want the ability to have a wireless external audio speaker. Typically, those are Bluetooth speakers. Bluetooth is great, with one important caveat. Bluetooth systems, in order to keep their battery life as long as it is, they are constantly in the hibernation mode. And so they're every now and then pinging to say, is there anything out there? And then they go to sleep for another 15 seconds. And then they ping, and then they go to sleep, and then they ping. And when something hits, then they're in active state, and they're continually be communicating with each other. But what will happen is that if you generate a phrase, it may be in between that pinging, and so it'll clip the front end of that phrase. So whatever speaker system that you have, just make sure there's a way to wake that up so that if the connection is made, and then it can start generating phrases. Now, worst case scenario here, it's just going to clip the very first part of the first phrase that you use. Not a big deal. So you just have to repeat that first phrase twice. But nonetheless, if you're looking for an external audio speaker, probably a Bluetooth, it's nice to have one that you can tap to have it sync up and be connected. Lots of different Bluetooth, wireless Bluetooths. One that people don't think about, so I'm going to throw it at you here, is Motorola makes a lot of very nice wireless Bluetooth devices that were designed or are designed to connect to the visor of your car. And you can use that same clip and connect it over your belt loop or purse strap, whatever it might be. So take a look at some of these Motorola Bluetooth systems designed for speech generation or for voice synthesis in the automobile, and use them on the body. It's a very low-cost solution that works actually very well. And so something, again, that most people don't think of is taking a look at the Motorola car-based systems. Also, just wanted to throw this one out at you. This is a feature that you may want, but if there's any possibility that you're going to be traveling overseas, then you may want instant language translation. And so with our systems and with some other systems, any phrase that you enter in English can be spoken in your desired language. So it doesn't have to be generated in English. It can be generated in Russian or Spanish or Vietnamese or Thai. Whatever language that you're in, whatever country you're in, it's kind of nice to be able to communicate directly in that language. One thing that's important, that if you're doing this, you want that language translation to be occurring locally on your device, because you may not have internet connectivity, and if you do have internet connectivity, it may be very expensive. You're paying roaming charges in order to do that. So it's very nice if you can have the translations occurring locally on your device versus in the cloud someplace. And it's very nice to have bi-directional language translation. So even though you can ask a question, for example, can you help me find this address, and that would get voiced out in Russian or Vietnamese or Spanish, it's nice when that person responds in Spanish for you to be able to understand what they're saying. And so that's the bi-directional language translation side. And certainly with our systems at SpeechGear and Auditory Sciences, we do that. As part of our relationship with the military, we certainly have developed a very wide range of languages that are simultaneously translated bidirectionally and locally on the device. So again, if you're traveling, it's just something to consider about. If you're potentially going to travel, it's just something to consider, is that, hey, I should get a speech generation system that's going to support me and how I want to communicate, which if I'm traveling to Sweden, I perhaps want to be able to speak Swedish. Okay, so we spent quite a bit of time on part 3, part 4, and part 5. We're going to try and wrap this up a little bit here because I think I've been going quite a while. Funding, where to get it. And so let's talk a little bit about funding. Certainly there are a lot of programs to help cover costs, so Medicare, Medicaid, and such, but certainly these systems have become much more affordable. The idea of having to spend $7,000 to $8,000 on a device is kind of past history. Certainly there are the old established companies that will still happily sell you a system for $7,000, $8,000, and when you get that system, it's going to be basically single purpose, it's going to be heavy, indestructible. They are going to do a good job of supporting you on that, give them credit for that much, but it's a lot of money, very inflexible, and I certainly wouldn't recommend going that route. Medicare, Medicaid is it's a long process. You're filing paperwork, you're waiting for approval, you're going to doctors, you're getting all these forms filled out. It can be a very frustrating process that at the end of the day really doesn't get you much. In the past, when again the only option was these very expensive systems, by all means people did that. But today I would strongly consider just passing all that and buying a lower cost system. Our particular system is $159. You can get systems for $8 out there. And so a very wide variety of capable software solutions that are going to be multi-purpose, run on your Chromebook, whatever it might be, and you're going to be able to buy them today and use them today. And so I would certainly take a look at using those. Or maybe you have a rich aunt or uncle that can buy it for you. Who knows? All sorts of different ways to get things funded. One site that out of many that do have programs to help cover costs, or at least are going to point you in the directions, is this particular one. So again, I'll let you take a look at the title there, but this is just one source that is a very good job in terms of pointing you in directions in order to potentially get funding to help your system. But again, the systems have gotten much lower cost. And I realize $159 isn't money that's just laying around. That's a decision for you to make. But you know, $8 sort of things are certainly out there and you can use them in order to generate speech, at least get you going. Also on our home site, Auditory Sciences, certainly we do keep aware of various programs in order to generate funding. One that people are typically not aware of is the Disabled Access Credit Program, which will pay 50% of the cost, and that includes your computer, so you could buy software and computer. And again, maximum credit up to $5,000 a year. Lots of different restrictions go into that, but certainly those are restrictions that with a little creativity can be met. And so the DAC program is one that people typically don't know about, and it certainly exists, so I just wanted to point that out. If you go to the Auditory Sciences website under the grants, you'll be able to see links for the DAC program. So that was a quick overview on funding, and now I want to give you some links for keeping up with news on speech-generating devices. And by all means, this is a site that you want to head over to, the vocaldisorders.org. And so on vocal disorders, there's a lot going on there. So there's information, resources, and there's also a chat line. So you can get together with a group. You can ask questions. You can look at previous discussions to see what other folks are talking about. There's a lot going on in the vocal disorders page, and I would strongly encourage you to head over there to take a look at that. Again, vocaldisorders.org is the link there. In addition to that, some other social media sites, certainly use them to your advantage. So for example, on Facebook, if you're into Facebook, do a search for speech generating device, and what you'll find is a discussion group that you can post things on Facebook. The plus and minus of Facebook, obviously very public, but certainly go ahead and use that. LinkedIn is another resource in the social media world, and so you can go to the speech generating devices group of LinkedIn and be able to get information there. And again, on Auditory Sciences website, we're going to give you information in terms of various newsletters and such that you can sign up, one of which is the U.S. Department of Labor newsletter that produces some pretty good information. So I've been talking here quite a bit. Thanks for attending. I appreciate your attention, taking the time to learn a bit more about speech generating devices. I'll give you my contact information here. Again, Robert Plumquist, and you see my phone number and email address. Give me a call, send me an email. Happy to chat with you. If you have ideas on speech generating devices or questions, certainly that's what we're here for. And if I'm available, I'd really love to chat with you, but there's certainly other people in the offices that can certainly help you as well. Again, thanks for taking the time to learn a bit more about speech generating devices and to pay attention to the vocal disorders and some of the capabilities that are available today and what's coming out in the near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.